facilitated by Tanya B. Hunter. The fact that you are here today indicates to me that you are interested in who can write. If not, then you're in the wrong webinar. However, I hope you will still stay and find the information interesting and helpful. Once again, my name is Tanya Hunter, and I will be the one facilitating this webinar today. Okay, so the first screen that you see is copyright material. I do consider this material to be copyrighted. I ask that you do not post it on the internet because that's not fair to people who pay for this webinar for you to distribute it for free. I want you to use for your own personal use. Do not reproduce in any form or fashion. Okay, so a little bit about maybe you're able to tell already that I am non-traditional person, so therefore my webinars are non-traditional. I am currently an author. Genres, I do comedy, self-help, a lot of health books because I have an extensive background in health as well as retail. Sorry about that pop up. I'm a parent. I'm unmarried. I'm a successful business owner, public speaker, voice actress, private consultant, and an allied health instructor. This next page is my Amazon page. It is my Amazon website. I'm sorry, my Amazon author page. You see it flashed there and it flashed out. So I am indeed a true author. You can go to Amazon and just Google me, and all my books pop up. Okay, so today, in order to maximize your experience today, we ask that you listen closely, take notes, write down any questions that you have, and then we can review the content again. So when I say maximize your experience today, some people forget the simple things like turning up your volume. So please make sure your volume is turned up so you can hear. And thank you for your purchase. Today's objectives are being a writer. Who can be a writer? How do I know if I can write? And what do I write about? And at the end, we will touch on some grammar and structure. Do I need to be a scholar? Do I need to learn how to write? And do I need to take advice from other writers? Okay, so now let's get down to the meat and the potatoes. Who can be a writer? Then I ask this question, is a writer born or is a writer made? The answer to both of those questions is yes. You would say, well, two different questions, I can answer both be the same. Because there are writers that are born, there are writers that are made. That's something to say. Well, I always tell people that when they say, well, I can't write, and I always tell them, well, you talk. So if you can talk, you can write. Instead of saying it, just write it. And have you ever had someone to come up to you and say, hey, let me tell you what happened to me? And you're like, really? What happened? And the story goes on and 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 on. And you want to stop listening, but you can't. You can't stop listening because the information is just too juicy. You want to walk away because you know this person is exaggerating and it's so much drama, but the story is so interesting, you just cannot walk away. And so the same is with the book. You know, a book is just a juicy story. The only difference between the book and your friend is that instead of telling the story, the author of the book decides to write the story. So I always tell people, if you've got a story to tell, instead of telling it, just write it down. If you can tell a story, you can write a story. Instead of speaking it, just write it down and let others read it. So you may say, hey, okay, so you told me that I can write, but what do I write about? Do I have a story to tell? Everyone has a story to tell. I tell people just look around them. Look around you. Look at the objects around you. Look at the people in your life. Do these people, do these objects inspire thoughts or memories? Well, these thoughts can be put into words, words that you can turn into a story. Okay, so I'm going to show you a series of pictures. And I want to know if these pictures, whether they provoke thought, memories, or inspire. And I wrote this, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And I wrote that for two reasons. I want you to take 10, 15 seconds to look at both of these pictures. The reason I wrote a picture worth a thousand words just because that's a cliche that's we say all the time. Worth a thousand words. But the reason why I'm saying this, and this is on another webinar that I do about short stories and flash fiction. Short stories are usually short, hence the word short stories. Flash fiction is a short story. They're usually 1,000 words or less. So therefore, you can look at a picture, get inspired, and write a short story about it, and there you go. You can be published. Matter of fact, a lot of publishers of short stories and flash fiction will not publish you if you have more than 1,000 words. So that's a good way to get started. If you're afraid to start out writing, oh, what I do, you can start out doing short stories, but that's in a different webinar. But today we're going to talk about pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Continue to look at these two pictures. Okay, the first one is a picture of a bike, a bicycle, or a bike. Does this bicycle inspire any thoughts for you? Any stories? Stories of your childhood. You may think, I remember when I got my first bike, learning how to ride it. I fell off of it 4 times. And that may turn into a story. That story can go on for 10, 15 minutes. You can write about how that was that experience. You can write about how your dad stayed outside with you all night until you learned how to ride. And that was a bonding experience. Because of that, both of you slept all day the following day. You turn that into a story. Someone may have a different type of story. They may say, well, my bike got stolen when I was a kid, so my story is not a happy story, but a sad story. And then someone else may say, well, my bike got stolen and I had to walk 8 blocks and got a hole in my socks and then I got blisters on my feet and then I had to go to the doctor and then I had to take an antibiotic and got allergic to the antibiotic and had to go back in the hospital again, had to get IVs, then had to get my foot amputated. So this picture of a bicycle can inspire so many different types of stories. But I use this as an example because when people say, well, I don't know what to write about, I tell them that just look around you. There's always something there that can inspire a story. There are people who have written poems about sand. And there are people who have written entire books about sand. And you would think, well, sand is something small. But anything small can inspire something big. So take a couple of more seconds to look at these pictures. The second picture is a picture of the Statue of Liberty. What does that remind you of? What does that make you think of? Do you remember the time when you first visited, you on a vacation, you and your friends, and you went to see the Statue of Liberty? Or do you think of, well, I've never seen the Statue of Liberty, and maybe me and my friends can go one day? Or you may say, what do I know about the history of the Statue of Liberty? Maybe you can write a book about that. Maybe you can write a book entitled My Journey to Liberty. People may say, well, what an interesting topic. I wonder what she's talking about. If she's talking about the Statue of Liberty or she's talking about liberty like freedom. What type of liberty? So you can say My Journey to the Statue of Liberty, and you can tell how you and your friend are on a quest to visit the Statue of Liberty and you're facing a lot of obstacles, roadblocks, broken down cars, things happen in your trip. What is supposed to be a 2-day trip, a 2-day journey to see the Statue of Liberty end up taking you 2 weeks, but you finally get there, and you finally get there. The monument is closed because of construction, or someone said, oh, well, you can't go see the Statue of Liberty today. So that could be a story. It could be a short story. You could actually turn that into a novel. So that's just an example of how pictures. I want to show you a couple of more pictures too through the slides and try to just to get you an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is a picture of the beach. I say the beach. Some people say the shore. We all love the beach until it's hurricane season, and then we don't want to have anything to do with the water. But so just look at this picture, and what does this remind you of? What does this make you think of? Does this make you think of long walks? Maybe a beautiful sunset? Or maybe you have a story about how your lover proposed to you, then dropped the ring in the sand, and the ring got washed away by the ocean and lost forever. You may have a bad story. Maybe you had a friend that drowned in the ocean. So whenever you look at this, it makes you want to write about a sad story. What story comes to mind when you see this picture? How are you inspired? Okay, so this one I put "Come Fly with Me." A picture of an airplane, and then it's a picture of over here beside where you see the flights getting delayed. What do these two pictures remind you of? What kind of story can you tell about having a delayed flight? You can write a story about like the movies one did about being stuck in the airport. You can write a story about how your flight was delayed and you had to stay in the airport for 3 days and how things change at night at the airport. You know, you can make things come alive and say, well, when everyone has gone home and, you know, things happen at the airport, or you can write a story about how your flight was delayed. You can write a story about the first time you flew, how wonderful it was, how what the sound of the engine of the plane sound like when you took off. I mean, like I said, the possibilities are endless. I like this one because I put thank you for the ride, lady. The dog is saying, yeah, let me out of here now. This one can inspire. When I look at this picture, of course, I think of certain things, but then there's so many, maybe 1,000 things you could come up with this just this one picture. I'm thinking of someone taking a long road trip and decided to pull over at a rest stop so the dog can stretch his legs and use the bathroom. Someone else may say, well, this reminds me of my pet. I had a dog that looked like that, and his name was Bo, and we grew up with this, you know, he was this kind of dog, but he was that kind of dog. So this picture inspires me to write about pets. Someone else may say this picture inspired them to write about the weather. Because as you can see, it looks like it's snowing in the background. And then that tree there is shaped like a Christmas tree. So someone may say, well, this story inspired me to write about the first time we went out in the woods and cut down my first Christmas tree. It looks like she's carrying something on the top of that SUV. I think it's maybe a boat or something, kayaking. Maybe someone can say, oh, I remember our vacation we took one summer. Someone else may be inspired about the tires. They say, you know, I write a story about big tires, big wheels on the truck. Some people can maybe write a story about mud racing, you know, mud flaps. So just looking at that one picture already, I've spit out what 10, 15 different ideas just from that one picture. You can also turn your diary into a book. This is interesting to me. Private thoughts, but that's still fine. So I'm just going to read to you exactly what I wrote on the page. It says a diary is a record of your life over a period of time. You can use that information to write an autobiography. There are several types of diaries. You can keep a food diary of what you ate as you travel and write a book about favorite dishes while traveling abroad. You can keep a diary of your weight loss. Then you can write a book about it. How to lose weight or lose a certain amount of weight over a certain amount of time. You can write a travel diary that records events and records your travel and write a book about the best places in America to take a vacation. Okay, this next idea was not my idea. I actually got it from a coworker of mine. But he said he was turning his email into a book. I thought that was very interesting. I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm saving all my emails. He said, because I'm going to turn them into a book. And I'm like, whatever. So I actually started looking into it and speaking to him more and picking at him about it. It became like a private joke around work. Because I thought it was interesting how we wanted everything to be electronic. And now that we have our emails and our chats and our texts electronic, we now want to turn around and put them back on paper. So I thought that was interesting. But he said he wants to turn his emails and his online chats into a book. So I actually looked into it on the internet, and there are different programs that will help you do that. You gather up that information and you submit it, and they actually put it in a book form for you and submit it back to you. You review it, edit it, proofread it, and okay it, and then you get it published. And I think that is very interesting. So I'm going to read what I actually wrote on this paper here about this. I said, turn your emails or online chats into a book. You can make your online conversation and memoirs of sorts and write a book. It's almost like keeping letters from a pen pal over the years as you read them as an adult, where she wrote about the first time she got her period or the first time she kissed a boy. This is a very popular, and there are several programs out there that will help you form your emails into a book. Then I wrote down, it's funny how people want to get away from paper by electronic communication. Now they want to put the electronic conversation back into the paper, and people are never satisfied. That's very interesting to me because when I was growing up, I had a pen pal, a Japanese pen pal, and I kept her letters for years and years and years. I went to college and I had those letters because it was interesting how her academic level, how she was so, her intellectual level was so much higher than mine, and her educational system was different. When I was out for the summer, she was still in school, and I thought that, that was when I was young. I was like, oh, poor you. And as I got older, I was like, well, they focus a lot on education and not wasting a lot of time. And she could speak several languages, whereas I could only speak one. I grew to envy her because she had that extra education that I didn't get. So this is just, like I said, some ideas of different things that you can look when you think you have nothing to write about. You can become an author by turning your emails into a book. And another thing that I didn't put in this PowerPoint, and maybe I will add it later, is the recipes. Great grandmother recipes. You can put your great grandmother recipes in books. I didn't add that in here, but that's another idea. Then I have keep a journal about an event or a tragedy. Unfortunately, there are things that happen in our lives that we wish didn't happen. Can't do anything about them. But you can keep a log. Let's say, for instance, you have a family member that's going through a medical crisis, cancer or something like that, that's prolonging their life or prolonging their death, and it's taken 2 or 3 years to resolve. Whether the story ends successfully, where the person recovers 100%, or if the story ends unsuccessfully, where the person ends up losing their life, you can still write a story about that, and that story can be used to help other people who is experiencing a similar tragedy. You can use your story to help them through. So, like I said, there's so many things that you can write a story about. So, getting back to what I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, but I have a lot of authors, really serious novel writers, that get angry because they think that you have to be a special person to write a book. You have to be a special person to be an author, but you do not. So some people ask the question, do I need to be a scholar? What do I need to know about English? I think that you need to have some type of academic knowledge as far as forming sentences only. You don't have to be a scholar unless you're writing for academic purposes, meaning that if you're writing books, or a friend of mine, she actually writes textbooks for school. So it would be smart if she actually knew what she was writing about, since kids are going to be using her information to learn. So in her case, she would have to have a literary background. But regular people writing, I don't think you should, unless you're writing history books or maybe an instruction manual. Because of the internet is one of the places where it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because now anybody can go in there and anybody can be a star and just throw up a YouTube video. So because of internet jargon and texting, relaxed writing is what a lot of people are doing. And I have a funny story about that, because I became an author, and during the time that I started writing books, I was also going back to school to obtain another degree in another discipline. And because I write so relaxed and conversational, like I talk, when it came time to writing my school papers all over again, I had to almost like teach myself how to rewrite, things that I learned years ago. Like, oh God, I can't write that. This is an academic paper. I want to get a good grade. I just can't write like I talk. And so I thought that was very interesting. But it is based on the book that you are planning to write. If you are planning to write a book about recipes, then no, you're not going to be forming too many sentences. Or if you are just writing a book and you're just telling a story, you do not have to be an expert in English. Some people want to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. People want correct sentence structure. You can send the book off for editing. You can edit it yourself. It's up to you, but you do not have to be a scholar. Okay, so for those of you who believe that you do have to learn how to write, and you do want to learn how to write, I place this on here just for that purpose only. There's nothing wrong with taking a writing class. Just give you an idea of the feel of what it feels like. There's nothing wrong with receiving ideas and tips from other writers. Ask them, was it essential? What was the feedback they received from their customers? Did their customers say, well, I would rather the book be written differently? It was easy to read, or it was hard to read because it had to be in big words. with pulling out your old grammar books from high school, going over, making sure that you have subject, um, verb agreement. There's nothing wrong with pulling out those old essays you wrote in high school to look over to see how you structured your paragraphs and how things are being done correctly. There's nothing wrong with trying to be correct, but my point is you do not have to feel like, okay, well, I need to go get a degree in English before I write my book. Okay, so if you decide that you still want to go, you want to learn, where can you go to learn how to write? Well, you can go to a lot of writing classes. Some places have free writing classes. I put down here to find websites that specialize in writing. There are a lot of websites out there, some free, some not, and you can get some ideas about how to write. There's also some software that you can actually write something and submit it to the software, and and you can put it, because I actually use it on some of my papers that I submitted from school. I downloaded it onto my computer, and whenever I would write a paper, I would submit it, and then they would edit it and send it back. Or they would edit, they would highlight the errors. I would have to correct it, but they would highlight the errors and let me know that I need to make these corrections. And it was, just basic grammar stuff like run-on sentences, subject verb agreement, this type of thing. Put a comma here, put a comma. So you could also go to workshops. Some workshop gives tips on writing. Like I say, some are free, some are not free. A lot of the community colleges have courses at night for adult learners. So you can go back to school if you want to take a course or classes for credit and for credibility. And the reason why I said credit and credibility, credit, give you college credit if you want to add to your resume that you did go to college and take some classes. That looks good. And for credibility, it looks good because if you're writing a book, a novel, and you say that I have a master's in English and literature, that gives you more credibility. So people may say, oh, I'm actually going to buy this book and read it because I'm going to get my money's worth because this person's actually knows how to write because he has a degree in literature. So you can do that if you want to. Um, so I've given you a lot of information today. We talked about who can be writer. Anyone can. You write about anything you want to write about. If you can tell a story, you can write a story. So some of you may say, when and how can I start? Well, the answer to that question is you can start right now. Literally, you can get up, go get some paper and a pencil, and start writing right now. Just start writing. It's okay if it's messy. That's fine, but just write something. I recommend you write every day. You get into the habit, you get into the groove of writing. At least 300 words a day. You can revise it later. I just say start by doing. That's where you start. You start by doing. So this concludes my webinar, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I enjoy speaking with you as I enjoy speaking with people often. I try to keep it relaxed and conversational and not really academic. I try to get away from that because when I teach school, I have to be, it's like I keep saying, I put myself in like a different personality. So when I'm lecturing to students, I feel a certain way. When I'm facilitating to a group, because I also teach tobacco cessation, and I teach that in a group setting. And I'm also a cognitive behavior group facilitator. So I teach that in a different setting. But I try to stay conversational. So I hope that you enjoy this webinar, and I hope that I see you soon. I have several webinars, that's on my site right now. One that's really interesting that I'm mentioning here. It's about metadata. A lot of people don't know what metadata is, but metadata is very important in your book. It is the information about your book, the description of your book, and the format. And we will talk about, I have a whole webinar on formatting your book because you format your book according to what kind of book you have. ISBN number, that's something we talk about on the metadata webinar as well. Do you want to own your own ISBN number or do you want it assigned to you? We're going to talk about that, being able to take your book to if you have a publisher and you decide you don't want that publisher anymore, you want your book republished under another. But we'll talk about that in that metadata webinar. And we talk about the covering of your book, the pricing, the category, and what territories you want to sell it in. Some people just want to sell it in the United States only. Some people want to be international. But that's in that webinar, which I think is a really, really interesting one. But look for future webinars coming very, very soon. Thank you. This concludes our webinar. So I say everyone can be a writer. Does that include me? How do I know if I can be a writer? Well, for one, I know that you can be a writer because you are here. The fact that you're here tells me that you're passionate about writing. You have dreamed about writing, and you have a desire to write. A lot of authors get mad at me when I say that because they want to be territorial and say that you have to be a special person to know how to write, and you're encouraging anybody to just go out there and just put out any kind of information. But fortunately and unfortunately for us, in this day and age and time, you don't have to be an expert. Be somebody. We know that from what we read and what we see on television, all these reality shows. So you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a scholar to write. Anyone who has a pen and a paper and has something to say can write. Speaking of having something to say, right? This next slide is kind of funny because I say, hey, I hope you have a wonderful day and I hope to see you soon. If you have any questions or concerns, visit me on my website or email me at Belita Hunter, b@belitahunter.com, or call me. Thank you.